Okay, now we're going to talk about reflections. Remember, our keyword for reflections is flip. The FL in reflections helps us to remember that keyword. And so what we're going to look at is the patterns first, and then we're going to look at some graphs, and I'll show you why that pattern works. So the pattern for x-axis reflection is just to take the x, leave it alone, and to change the sign of the y. That negative in front of the y does not mean make it negative. It means change the sign. So if it is positive, now it's negative. If it's negative, it's now positive. With the y-axis, we're going to change the sign of the x and leave the y the same. The line y equals x, I'll show you what that looks like here in just a second on a graph, but all you have to do for that one is simply switch your coordinates. If it was 0.2, 3, now it's 0.3, 2. No sign changes, just literally flip your numbers. And then y equals negative x, if you ever happen to see this one, we're not going to on our notes, but I wanted you to have it on this paper just in case, is you're going to change the sign of both your coordinates. Okay, so let me show you how these work. So let's go to our notes under reflections. The first one we're going to look at is the x-axis. Always pay attention to where your line of reflection is. So I like to highlight my line of reflection because it makes it visually easier for me to see the reflection. You can do it one of two ways. You can write down your coordinates and use the trick that I showed you, or you can use the graph. We can say that point A is 1, 2, 3, 4 units above the line. We could go 4 units below. That's perfectly acceptable. Okay, you don't have to have a graph to do this though, but if you do, you can always just count it on your graph. So I'm going to show you how to use the pattern though. We can see that point A is located at negative 3, 4. And so I told you a while ago the pattern for x-axis reflection is to leave the x the same and change the sign of the y. So we're going to leave the x value the same, we're going to change the sign of the y. And so if we go and plot that point, negative 1, 2, 3, down 1, 2, 3, 4 is right here. Mark it A prime, and we can see that that's perfectly reflected over that highlighted line. I'm going to give you time in a minute to go back and finish points B and C, and that way you can practice it. Let's look at the next one, the y-axis reflection. The y-axis is right here, so this time we're going left and right. I know it seems a bit backwards, but we're going across the line. Again, if you want to count, we can see that x is 2 units to the right, so we would go 2 units to the left. But I want to focus on the patterns, and so we can see that x is at 0.24. The pattern for a y-axis reflection is to change the sign of x, leave y the same. So if we change the sign of the x, it becomes negative 2, and the 4 will remain the same. So if we go to plot that, negative 2, 1, 2, up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, we can see x prime goes right there, and we can see that that's perfect mirror image across that purple line. Here's that one that you may have kind of forgotten since Algebra 1, the line y equals x. Go back to your algebra days, y equals mx plus b. Our slope is 1, our y-intercept is 0 since there's nothing after the x. We can see that in the line drawn in the graph. It starts at 0, goes up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. So this one's a little bit harder because you can't just simply count like you would the others. There is a way to count it, and I will show you that, but to me the pattern is so much easier on this one. So we can see here that point R is at negative 4, 6. I just counted that on the graph. Remember, the pattern is just to flip them. So no sign changes. So we have 6, negative 4. No sign changes. All we did was literally flip them. So if we go to graph that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, down 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's where R prime goes. And we can see across the line y equals x. And if you have to kind of turn it sideways, that's fine too, so you can see it being reflected. If you want to count it on the graph, here is the way you have to do it. You have to count from point R all the way down to that line. And I've already previously counted it, and I know that it is 10 spaces down to that line. If you're going to count, you would have to go then 10 spaces that way. So you can use your graph, but again, just flipping your coordinates is a whole lot easier. All right, we are going to skip example 4. You're not going to see origin reflection. That will be something that's very similar to a rotation on the next lesson. Now let's concentrate on these that don't have patterns to look at. So with these, you have to have your graph. You have to be able to count this. So our line of reflection, if you pay attention here, is x equals negative 1. So I'm going to go to negative 1 on the x-axis, so right there. and I'm going to draw my line off of that. Okay, so that's the line we're going across. So I see here that point A is at negative 3, 4. Okay, I also see that point A is 2 points or 2 steps away from the highlighted line where x equals negative 1. So if it's 2 to the left, I'm going to go 2 to the right and know that point A, or A prime, goes right there. And so A prime would be at 1, 4. Look at one more with you. We can see that B is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the right of the line. So we would go 5 to the left. And there's where B prime goes. So we can see, yes, they're not on the same side of the line, and that's okay. Our line of reflection goes right down the middle of the shape. So we know they're not all going to be on the same side. So B started at 4, 2, and it ended at negative 6, 2. We can see that our y values aren't changing here, but our x values are, and they're not just having a sign change or anything like that. So that's why we didn't write a pattern down for these. And so I'll let you go and finish point C here in a minute. Let's do one more together. Y equals negative 1. So let's go to our y-axis. Negative 1 is right there, so we go off the axis, and there's our line of reflection. So all the points are above, which means when we finish, all points will be below. So let's look at point A. Point A, if we count, negative 3, positive 4, we can see that it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 above the line, so we would go 5 below. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And there's where A prime would be at negative 3, negative 6. When you go to count these, make sure you go back to your original axis lines. Don't count off of the highlighted line. The highlighted line just helps you figure out how far your points need to be. But to write the actual location of it, you go back to your original X and Y axis. All right, so what I want you to do is finish out the ones that we didn't do together. Do not worry about example 4. We completely marked it out. But go back and do this. Make sure you're drawing your pictures, labeling with the primes, and write all your coordinates down.